We're in the Brooklyn Museum looking at a life-size male head.
This is one of the oldest terracottas from sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, it's about 2,500 years old.
It's from a part of Africa that we now call Nigeria, and this is one of numerous life-size human figures that have been found.
We've found heads, we've found bodies positioned in standing or seated or prayer positions, and we've also found animals from this region. They're called Nok terracottas, and Nok really just refers to a small village where the very first one was found. But since then, we've found quite a few in present-day Nigeria.
These have been found by farmers, people tilling fields, and as a result, many of the objects come without a careful scientific archaeological method that would give us more information about the objects themselves.
And in fact, we don't even have a name of a culture that made them. They're so old. But what we do know is that originally they were fired with a slip, and they were smooth in texture.
They're terracotta and they're hollow, and they would have originally had color applied to them. And what slip really is are very small fragments of clay, often with iron oxide that's mixed in, that can become a black or a red depending on how it's fired.
They were either built up through a coiling technique, or maybe it was a block of clay that was then hollowed out, which suggests a subtractive technique.
Well, there's no question that there's some subtractive work here, because we can see it incising into the surface, and we can see it scraping away, creating these beautiful, highly refined geometric forms for the face.
And most of the objects that we've found are very stylized and similar in that they all have this triangular shaped eye with a perforated pupil, these arched brows.
One of the most distinctive features of this head is the hair. Wonderful mounds, these craters around the back of the head.
If you look closely in the back, you can actually see lines that suggest the parting of the hair, and striation, which even suggests the combing process.
It's important to remember when we're looking at an object like this that we're not seeing it in its original context, the way it was used, the kind of environment it would have been in, and of course its original colors and whether or not there would have been anything added. When I see, for example, the perforations of the eyes which go all the way into the hollow of the clay object itself, my instinct is to imagine that that was filled with something, but we don't know.
And then if we also look at the mouth is slightly open. It suggests maybe speech, that the figure has something to tell us.
It's so animated. This is a figure that seems to be in the midst of a conversation. This is an object that was made at the same time that ancient Greece and Rome were in power, that ancient Egypt was still functioning, and yet here we are in sub-Saharan Africa. Clearly evidence of a very sophisticated culture.
It suggests that there was a art-making tradition in West Africa that is as ancient as Egypt, and that these artists were concerned with the representation of the human form. We don't have an example of the body that this went with, but we know that the bodies generally were smaller in scale than the head, so it suggests that the head was the most significant part. And we find that tradition of the head as the center, the seat of wisdom, in other cultures throughout West Africa, in this same region today.
There's a subtlety to the abstraction of the face that I find really compelling. Look, for example, at the way that the eyes, which are straight across at the top and then dip down, creates a sense of quietness in the figure and a sense of seriousness, a sense of gravity in the figure, but then is perfectly echoed in the area above the eye, between the top lid and the eyebrow.
It suggests an inner calm or an inner serenity that may tell us something more about the figure than just their surface depiction. It may suggest something about an inner thought or an inner morality that the artist was trying to convey.